All right, team, this is one episode you need to hear, especially if you're a female in your 30s or 40s plus, or you're a coach working with women in their 30s plus. I sat down with Linda Deer, who is the founder of Meno Doctor and hugely knowledgeable about women's health. She's a GP and a menopause specialist who's made it her mission to cut through the confusion around hormones, HRT, and all the messy bits of midlife that women go through. In our podcast, we covered everything from perimenopause to postmenopause, HRT, lifestyle strategies, common symptoms and myths that are around. So many women are misdiagnosed or dismissed with menopause or premenopause, and we wanted to clear the air and put some clarity around it. So join us now for our podcast around women's health, and let's get into it.
Like, if you could give me a bit of a rundown on your history, what got you into this, where you've come from and your journey.
I'm a doctor by trade, so actually a GP is what I specialised in. And then after working as a GP for a few years, realised that so much of what I was doing was seeing women with perimenopause and menopause, and eventually realising I'd been doing a very bad job of it because I wasn't taught that much about it at med school or normal school. Yeah. And I myself started to get some symptoms and didn't even recognise it in me. So all of that made me want to do something better and different. So I started really looking into menopause and how I could train in it and get some more info. So I did a course through what was called the North American Menopause Society, but is now called the Menopause Society, and got an exam. And then I decided, you know what, I'm just going to set up a clinic. So it was just me at first. So about 4 years ago, I started Meno Doctor, which is the name of the clinic. And I suppose the other reason I'm so drawn to this life phase for women, partly because I am one and went through it myself, but also because of all the other stuff that happens that is brings together the stuff I did before being a doctor. So I was a personal trainer for a while. I was a yoga teacher. And many moons ago, I was a gymnast and competed internationally. Wow. So all of that sort of fitness and nutrition and all of that is so important for women in this phase.
Absolutely. If you know much about my background, so my background is obviously coaching, nutritionist. Also studied menopause and women's hormones as well, because I work mostly with females. So for me, connecting with you was really to help everyone that we work with, both my wife and I, to help them more. It was about me understanding what women go through as much as I possibly can, because I'm never going to go through it. So if I can understand some of the science and the symptoms and things like that and what to look for, I mean, I could help people more with what I do. But hence why I always want to connect with people like yourself, because most of the women I work with are 30 to 50-ish range. So they're either, about to be premenopausal or going through it or just been through it kind of thing. So quite applicable to many of them.
Totally. That is the hot zone. So we've got to be prepared for this before it comes, ideally, as well. Otherwise, it's a real shock.
Yeah. And I think if people can have a bit of an understanding around what to look for, what you can do when things do happen, it just helps them have a bit of clarity and not feel isolated and they're on their own type thing as well.
Yeah, because it can be lonely, even though it's universal. It's bizarre. And frightening. Women think they're ill, they think they're mad. So all of that anxiety doesn't help.
Absolutely. It's not me just going crazy. So no, it's not. You're not crazy.
You're not losing it. It's normal but rough at times, a bit like puberty. I do a lot of the analogies to puberty, and that helps women go, oh yeah, things are a bit rough, but it gets better. And so
come out of it.
You come out of it, yes.
Cool. 100%. So I like the fact that what you just said there was that you're a GP and you sort of discovered that you weren't maybe as knowledgeable on this kind of things as what you believed or understood to be. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's a massive blind spot in medical training and GP training. And you don't know what you don't know
Yeah.
necessarily. And you're so overwhelmed with all the stuff you're supposed to know about in general practice. I mean, it is so general, it is ridiculous these days. But then when I realized how much I didn't know, I was shocked and thought, right, I've got to do something about this. So I did. And people thought I was mad when I first said, I'm going to set up a menopause clinic. You know, fellow doctors were like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I just thought the fact that they're that shocked by it is the reason I'm doing it.
Yeah.
People don't even realize what needs to be done. And that's the problem.
We have this battle a lot with other athletes and going to GPs, is that often they just don't understand or know the consequences of menopause and what they go through, right? Because like you say, it is a massive blind spot. So, you know, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to tee up with someone like yourself who has that history and a bit more knowledge, expertise around it, because then we can actually find the good and the bad and everything in between, right? And I think it's around educating people and giving them the full picture rather than just, oh, you should be okay. Hey, look, it's everyone goes through it, so deal with it, kind of thing. It's like, well, hang on. If you have headache, you take Panadol, right? There's reasons we have medication.
There is, and it's also appreciated. It's such a spectrum, you know. It's not the same for every woman, and that's probably one of the reasons it's hard to pin down. Sometimes it is so varied. It can be so sneaky. But yet, medicine and doctors should be able to help if a woman wants them to help.
Yeah.
But there has been this attitude for a while that, you know, it's still there, that women should just suck it up. It's normal, it's natural, and women can do that if they want to. You know, we're not ill. We can ride this out naturally. Lifestyle can be massively helpful, but there should also be other options there for women, and doctors need to be knowledgeable, but they also need to be sometimes a bit more sympathetic. You know, I think there's a lack of knowledge, but sometimes there's actually just a lack of sympathy.
Yeah.
And women get that vibe
Yeah.
sometimes when they go and ask for help. It just seems to be, it's like it's no big deal. And oh God, it can be a really big deal.
It can affect life quite drastically, can't it?
Yes, and everyone around her. You know, it affects you guys, if you know, our partners, our husbands, our colleagues. You know, our relationships get dragged into it, and it's complicated.
Absolutely. So what do you think the difference is? What would you explain to someone who doesn't know the difference between like premenopause and menopause?
Yeah. So if you think about like the journey women go through, and the journey women go through is basically, it's the journey their ovaries go through, right?
Yeah.
So our ovaries wake up at puberty, and when they wake up, they start making periods happen. So at some point, every woman has her first ever period. And that's because her ovaries have got going, making them happen. And then we have our reproductive years, which is when we're at our most fertile, which is basically our late teens, 20s, when women are usually having quite regular periods, ovulating every month, popping an egg out. But then at some point, our ovaries start to get a bit tired. And the reason they get a bit tired is because the egg number is starting to really dwindle.
Yeah.
Because women get all the eggs we'll ever get from the minute we're born.
Yeah.
In fact, from just before we're born. And they gradually decline. And once they reach a certain number, then we get into what's called perimenopause, which is, it means around the time of menopause, and it comes just before it.
Yeah.
And it's when the egg supply is getting quite low and the hormone production then goes a bit squiffy because of that.
Right.
So you don't have this nice monthly rhythm anymore. That can go on for several years. Everyone's perimenopause duration is different. It can be just a couple of years. It can be 10 years. But at some point, your ovaries then completely run out of eggs. And when they run out of eggs, they just stop making estrogen and progesterone.
Yeah.
And that causes periods to stop. So menopause is when a woman has her final ever period, which is usually around the age of 51.
Right.
But it's normal, any age from 45 to 55, a woman's periods can stop. We don't class that as sort of unusual.
Yeah.
It gets tricky for women who've not having periods anymore for other reasons. So women who are on contraception, stopping their periods, or women who've had a hysterectomy or an ablation, which makes their periods obviously stop happening. So sometimes for some women, the switch from peri to menopause and post-menopause can be tricky to define. But for most of us, it's when our periods stop. But we have to give it a year of no periods at all.
Right.
To be sure it's the last one, because in perimenopause, her periods can spread out for a while. So you've got this magical 1 year of no periods, and then you can call that woman post-menopausal, which means she's on the other side of menopause. And that's going to be the rest of her life then. The rest of our life is post-menopausal, which is however long we live. And depending when you go into menopause and how long you live, that can be a pretty big chunk of your life.
Absolutely.
Post-menopause. And that's when your estrogen and progesterone levels are just going to be low from then on.
Yeah. Okay. And what's some of the consequences of that is low estrogen and progesterone levels for some women?
It's bizarre because for some women there's no overt consequences at all. Like some women don't have any symptoms at all.
Yeah.
And we call it symptoms, even though this is not an illness. Some women get through perimenopause when their hormones are kind of doing this, and then they get to postmenopause when their hormones are low, and they don't get anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas other women can get lots of different things. We think about 75% of women get some symptoms.
Yeah.
And for, maybe at least a quarter of women, those symptoms are quite severe.
Right.
When you lose estrogen and progesterone, and when they're fluctuating, lots of parts of us can notice that, lots of parts of our body and brain, because we've got so many receptors for these hormones all over us.
Yeah.
So ovaries are doing a lot more than just making us fertile. They're very busy things.
Yeah.
They talk to our brains a lot. So they talk to the part of our brain that helps us regulate our body temperature. They talk to parts of our brain that help us remember things, regulate our emotions, even parts of our brain that help us balance. Even our cerebellum has got estrogen receptors on it. So some women get a bit kind of wonky and wobbly.
Yeah.
Some women notice that throughout their menstrual cycle when natural fluctuations happen as well. And you've got receptors in your muscles and your bones and your soft tissues, your ligaments, your tendons. So even our musculoskeletal system is listening to estrogen particularly, and to testosterone, which is another hormone that declines over time. So that's why the possible impacts can be so varied. For some women, it's a lot of brain symptoms like mood changes or brain fog. But for other women, it's more body symptoms like pain, joint pains, recurrent injuries.
Joint pain is a big one, isn't it? Like getting joint issues and tendon issues, and even some nerve stuff going on.
Funny nerve stuff, yeah. Women often say, like, it's like I'm suddenly 70, and they say, I get out of bed and I'm all stiff suddenly, and it takes longer to get going, and everything hurts. And there's a condition called fibromyalgia that a lot of it is more common in women, fibromyalgia, and that is basically pain in the body without any obvious cause. And I think a lot of those women are probably suffering with perimenopause, and we just haven't figured that out yet, or given them the right name for what's going on, because perimenopause and postmenopause can really hurt. A lot of body pain, and also head pain, headaches and migraines can be triggered and could be common.
Yeah. Okay. And I think it's a big thing in terms of as training, and you would know this from being a trainer and GP and all your experience as well, is that muscle makes us move, right? So if we are starting to be weaker, more pain, bone density decreases through menopause as well, the body can really struggle later on in life with quality of life, and just being able to move and be an active person until you're older, 70s, 80s, right? And if you can't keep your body healthy through nutrition and working it, exercise, etc., it's gonna make things a lot harder, especially for your hormonal levels as well.
Yes, muscle is a healthy thing to have on your body, and menopause takes it away from us.
Yeah.
So there is this thing called sarcopenia that starts in perimenopause, which is we literally start losing our muscle mass because the hormones are part of what maintains our muscle mass. And there's certain muscle cells in particular that we know get diminished without estrogen, and that's important muscle cells like satellite cells, the stem cells, which is how we make new muscle and repair muscle. And then particularly the fast twitch muscle fibers, they think sort of go first or the most. So yeah, we do have to kind of put the work in as women to offset what nature's trying to do to us. And she does seem a bit mean, really. Some of this stuff.
It is a bit, isn't it? Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that in the past, you know, a bit of the myth of, if I go to the gym, I'm going to get big and bulky. It's like, no, if you go to the gym, you're going to have more quality of life and move better, right? That's generally what it boils down to. The more muscle you have, the more you're able to move and function.
And you live longer. You're right. It's that long-term health benefit. Muscle doesn't sit there and just look pretty. You know, it is very useful metabolically active tissue. We know it helps with blood sugar control. It helps with metabolic rate. So yeah, the more muscle we can keep, the longer we will live, and the better we will live. Because as you mentioned, you know, getting older and getting, you know, frailty, falling, you know, all of that is often because as we get older, we get weaker and our muscles aren't there to hold us together and hold us up. And it does start now. You know, in this phase is when we want to be doing something about it, because, you know, it's hard to get into the habit. You know, it's harder to start a new fitness regime in your 70s.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not impossible.
No.
But, you know, and the more we can do now, the more we can prevent some of these changes that will keep us living longer and healthier.
Yeah. What about you know, fat gain? Because a lot of women report increasing body fat stores through menopause. Now, if we look at nutrition and the science of nutrition, we know that the metabolic rate does decrease, but it's not a significant decrease to sort of warrant kilos of weight gain, right? However, in my understanding is that hormones also have a relatively large role to play, especially as we get older, and the fluctuations and the changes in the body that can play an even higher impact on some people's metabolism than others. And I think we start to slow down and get, like you say, the fast twitch muscle fibers start to deteriorate faster. You generally feel a little bit more tired, a little bit more lethargic, so that kind of subconsciously slows you down. So we're just not as active as what we used to be in our 20s, early 30s, right? So that probably your NEAT level, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis effect, is probably one of your big protocols for weight gain. However, there is an aspect to the hormonal fluctuation in menopause as well, right?
Oh, that's sticking its nose in too. Yeah, it is. It's like a perfect storm. You know, everything seems to be conspiring against us.
Yeah.
And yes, the hormone changes themselves are also conspiring against. So women have this added burden, you know, that men don't have as they go through middle age. You know, middle age is hard on all of us, but it's kind of hard, even harder on women, because they've shown no matter what age a woman is when she goes into menopause, because some women go through menopause very early for unknown reasons, or because of surgery or treatments that damage their ovaries. So it's not just an age thing, you know, it is something to do with these hormones changing in menopause, because all this metabolic havoc and this body composition change happens regardless of the age menopause happens. Aging is in the background, you know, making things more difficult for everybody, men and women. But yeah, these hormones themselves are directly impacting, you know, how much muscle we can build, where we deposit our fat. So there tends to be this shift that the body starts to really want to put it around our stomach. That middle weight gain, which we know is the worst place our body could put it, apart from on our organs, but often it reflects that it is going on our organs as well if it's going around there. So, and you know, we lose that sort of hourglass figure. You know, suddenly it's like whatever we do, this middle bit won't listen. And that seems to be very hormonal because of various reasons. A big part of it, as I'm sure you know, is how much estrogen helps insulin. You know, so we end up with this insulin resistance going on, And then insulin resistance leads to all kinds of other issues that basically head us in the direction of more fat, less muscle. And yeah, breaking that cycle is quite hard because, as you also mentioned, some of the symptoms we get given, like fatigue and lack of motivation, really make, and a body that hurts. All of that makes it hard to do the exercise we need to do.
Yeah.
Mentally and physically do it, you know. So there's a lot of challenges for women at this phase, but hormones are a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So with the weight gain during menopause, like, do you feel like it's inevitable, or do you think there's a lot you can actually do to help it?
It's such a stubborn one sometimes, weight gain. It's such a stubborn one. And it sometimes doesn't seem very logical scientifically when a woman, when you look at her lifestyle and you look at, you know, she may or may not be on hormone therapy, but say if she is, so she's, you know, she's ticking every box she can, and yet her body's still not listening fully. So it can be a real challenge. It is like our body is on a mission to make it harder to maintain weight where we want it and maintain body composition where we want it, because it is about our shape, but it's also about what we're made of that matters. You know, we want to be made of bone and muscle.
Yes.
And yes, we do need some fat, like we need that stuff, but we don't want too much of it, and we don't want it in the wrong places. But it can be hard, but not impossible. But women, there's no getting away from the need for the lifestyle stuff, you know. Even if you're on tip-top HRT, whatever that is, you know, and you still, like I often say, HRT is not healthy lifestyle replacement therapy.
Yeah.
You can't, I heard someone else say, actually, sometimes it stands for husband replacement therapy. And I was like, oh, that's really mean. You know, a lifestyle is worth bothering with, because that's still the most powerful weapon to offset what your body's trying to do to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So lifestyle, number one, really fundamental for everything and quality of life and our health.
Yes,
and the other little things are added bonuses, aren't they? The cherry on top.
What I find with some women, though, is biologically things are so bad, as in nature's really giving this woman a rough ride with night sweats, lack of sleep, body pain, mood issues. You know, our mood can be affected hugely, and it's although exercise helps our mood, it's really hard to get there to do it. So some women are stuck in this vicious cycle, and sometimes hormones or hormone therapy can break that cycle a bit, so she can do the lifestyle stuff properly, you know, and get the benefits from it. But yeah, that bedrock is movement and food and sleep, you know, resting properly as well, which none of us are that good at anymore because life's so hectic.
Yes, everyone's doing everything.
Yeah, but we've got to fuel, you know, our bodies need the right fuel, and our bodies need to move, and we, you know, most of us don't move enough, so we have to make a conscious effort to plan movement, and it does have to be a bit deliberate. This, you know, weight training especially, I think that's the thing that a lot of women struggle with, because that's kind of more of a man's way to exercise, but we can learn a lot from men.
Well, I think I mean, I'm not going to say that because that doesn't come across for me as good, but you can say that.
I'm allowed to say that. You'll get in trouble if
I'll get in trouble for that. Yeah.
God, mansplaining.
Mansplain. Yeah. No, we won't do that. I think with resistance training, it is primarily being seen as something for men to do. You know, that's because men want to get strong and look big, and you know, bodybuilders, all that kind of stuff. But resistance training, in my opinion, is even more important for females to do than men, because of what you go through menopause in particular. The amount of bone, you know, density loss through menopause, the amount of muscle atrophy that happens over that time as well is so high compared to any other time in your lives. You're kind of getting ahead of the game if you can start earlier and have as much muscle and really good bone density prior to this, because regardless of how healthy or good you are, or you know, supplements you take and the food you eat, you're still going to have these hormonal fluctuations, and you're still going to have some loss on density and maybe muscle, depending on the person as well, right?
Yeah, but I mean, biology is a powerful force, isn't it? You know, nature can come in and ruin everything else you're trying to do sometimes. It feels. So it is really important for women to look differently at weight training. And you know, it's very hard, as you know, for women to get, you know, massive, because some women think, oh, I'll get massive.
Yeah, exactly.
And look, some women want to get massive. That's fine. You know, women, it is possible, but it's very difficult.
Very hard.
So, but our muscles do need to be challenged for these, to stimulate them enough to override these hormone problems. So women do need to feel confident and be helped to do heavier weights, and to focus more on weight rather than the sweaty stuff, the cardio stuff that is still good for our health, but it doesn't seem to be enough, certainly in this phase. So yeah, it's great that you know, trainers, including yourself, are sort of helping women get to know their muscles.
Yeah, absolutely. Fundamental for them, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So HRT, we'll talk a little bit about that. Like, okay, firstly, what is HRT? Hormonal replacement therapy, right? But
yeah, so everyone knows it as HRT. We're supposed to call it MHT now.
Okay.
But nobody bloody does, and neither do I really. But MHT stands for menopausal hormone therapy.
Okay.
And the reason they changed the name, there's a few reasons, but one of them was it's not always just replacing hormones, you know, and hormone replacement makes you think, oh, we're just, and that's maybe why a lot of people think, oh, you can only take that if you're postmenopausal. Right. You can only take it when you've got none of your own hormones anymore. And that's not true. We can give HRT in perimenopause and postmenopause. And that's why we now try and call it menopausal hormone therapy, because in perimenopause, you're still making your own estrogen and progesterone. It's just gone erratic.
Yeah.
So we're trying to stabilize it. So that's what HRT in peri is trying to achieve. It's trying to stabilize all of this nonsense. Whereas, yes, postmenopause we're replacing. And HRT, the main hormone we usually focus on for all women who take HRT is estrogen. Particularly estradiol, which is the certain estrogen our ovaries make the most of. And that's the type of estrogen that plays all these many roles. It's the most potent estrogen in women, and it's the one that we miss the most when it's gone. So most forms of HRT is predominantly about trying to stabilize estrogen. Some women also need some progesterone.
Yep.
Not every woman has to take it, but every woman is welcome to take progesterone. There's a bit of a sort of, in doctors' minds, progesterone is seen as only useful for wombs, which she is very useful for wombs. She helps wombs stay calm if you give a woman estrogen, because wombs can get quite upset if all they hear is estrogen. They can get abnormal even over time, or cancerous. So progesterone protects wombs, but for some women she also has positive effects on their brain and other parts. And it can help with sleep, certain forms of progesterone. So women in HRT, it's mainly about giving estrogen in a stable way, plus or minus some progesterone. And some women take testosterone, the third hormone our ovaries make. That can be part of an HRT regime as well.
Yeah. Okay. So it's mainly those three hormones that HRT would cover, or is there any others?
So HRT really is just covering those. It's kind of like, you know, what do ovaries do, or what did they used to do, or what would we like them to do? And basically the main thing we'd like to recreate is often the estrogen. And instead of imitating the fluctuations that nature gives us, especially in perimenopause, but even as we're menstruating, we kind of give women a set level of estrogen, a fuel supply every day. And for a lot of women, that makes them feel much more stable. There isn't this ride anymore that nature's been throwing them on.
Yeah.
So they're the three hormones of HRT, and testosterone is not always part of it.
No.
For a lot of women, estrogen and progesterone can be wonderful enough to kind of to do all the hormonal stuff that's needed. But there's other things on the table. Say if women's symptoms are bothering her, but she doesn't want to take HRT. There's other things doctors can offer women that are not hormonal that can help, and there's herbal things women can take.
Right.
And obviously there's just the lifestyle things that women can do, and women can pick and choose and mix and match all these options.
Will work for them the best.
Yeah, so there's not, often you hear there's no one size fits all. There really isn't. It's a buffet that women can, go to whenever they want and try things. And sometimes it's hard for women to find the combination that works for them.
Yeah. Because
nature won't tell you what that is. And it is a trial and error of bringing things in and taking other things out. And then, if you can help a woman find her package that's going to be best package for her, which may include HRT, it may not, you can help women get through this stormy bit in one piece.
Yeah, that's good. That's cool. So, I mean, in terms of like other things that you mentioned, so lifestyle obviously being probably your main one, like training, eating well, fueling the body, recovering well, getting adequate sleep, plenty of hydration, that kind of stuff, right? That would be probably, in my opinion, number one.
Totally. It's like the bedrock. When I do my buffet analogy with patients, I sort of say, look, this is it's pick and choose, but there's a plate everybody should get.
Yeah.
And it's the lifestyle plate. You've got to take a big dollop of that away with you and really try and make your lifestyle better for you. Sleep is a tricky one though, isn't it? Because
it's easy to say, hard to do.
Right? Yes, and sometimes the more you hear about how important sleep is and how your immune system needs it and everything needs, then you're sort of freaking out, thinking, oh my God, I'm going to die if I don't sleep. And then you can't sleep because you're so stressed about not sleeping. And for some women, they'd love to sleep, but they're sweating all night. It's hard to sleep when you're drenched in sweat, or they're up going for a pee every 10 minutes because their bladder's gone nuts with these hormone changes. Or they're just on, like their sleep-wake cycle is totally kaput because estrogen was helping conduct that, and cortisol and melatonin run amok. Yeah. So for some women, the more we talk about sleep, the worse they feel. Because even doing all the right things, like having a good sleep routine and avoiding screens and going to sleep at the same time, we've still got to do that. Yes. But there's some poor women out there that tick all the sleep boxes and they're still lying there wide awake for no good reason. But you're right, lifestyle is almost a non-negotiable. Yeah. Even if it's hard to do, we've got to try our best. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the bedrock of any other option that she might feel she needs.
So what are some of the other options that they can do in terms of, not if they just set against HRT completely, what could they potentially, and they're doing the lifestyle, what about supplementation or anything like that they can look at taking?
Yeah, it kind of depends what symptoms are bothering them the most. So say if it's sleep, say if it's lack of sleep, you've got magnesium, which can be very helpful with that. You've got melatonin as a non-hormonal medication. It does need to be prescribed here in New Zealand. Other countries it doesn't. So you've got sort of natural and non-hormonal meds that can help with sleep, because if you sleep better, that can lead to a lot of other good things.
Yeah, absolutely.
If her thermostat is the main problem and her hot flushes and night sweats are just terrible, there are black cohosh has a bit of evidence as a herbal remedy that can help reduce hot flushes. And then other things doctors can offer are meds that were designed for other purposes, but we've realized can help with hot flushes. One of those is antidepressants that act on serotonin, because serotonin plays a bit of a role in our thermostat. And then there's other meds that were designed. One of them helps with pain as well, but it can also switch off hot flushes. It's called, there's two types, gabapentin and pregabalin. Often a lot of breast cancer patients use that, and that can really help with their flushes and night sweats. And there's a few other medications that were designed for other reasons, but can really help switch off flushes. And then if mood is the main problem for the woman, then yes, antidepressants can sometimes help with that.
Yeah.
From a natural point of view, St. John's wort can be, very helpful with mood. Ashwagandha, lots of women find that sometimes helpful with the sort of stress, anxiety.
There's a good calming, relaxing type supplement you can take.
Yeah. And a lot of women get that gift from menopause and perimenopause, where they're just really anxious all the time suddenly. They just can't switch off. And it's a real torture, that one.
Yeah.
So ashwagandha sometimes can help with that. And then obviously the psychology, some women do find psychology help. There's a bit of evidence that CBT can help with hot flushes.
Okay.
So I believe that, but I do think we shouldn't be. It's also not fair to say to women, you can think yourself out of this.
Yeah.
Because hot flushes can be massively physical.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you can sit and meditate, but it's gonna go through you like a freight train.
Yeah.
But saying that, meditation, mindfulness, breathing techniques, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
So
it really has a place, right? And it's all these little tools that can add up to help someone navigate their journey as best as possible for them. But like you say, it's not really ever one thing that's going to make or break the bank. Apart from, even lifestyle, like you say, but lifestyle is the absolute must do, non-negotiable. But even then, there's other things that may need to come into it that help.
Yeah, and there's no right or wrong answers either, and there shouldn't be any judgment over women on whether they do this, whether they do that, and what works for your friend might not work for you, or what worked for your mum might not work for you. Nature's really random with what she dishes out to women, and she can change what she dishes out even to the same woman as the years roll by. So you get everything sorted, you get your buffet, you get all your choices and they're all working for you, and then 2 years later it's not working anymore. And this is the fun of this phase, that the goalposts keep moving. I'm sorry, you might hear my dog in the background there.
That's right.
He's getting involved.
He's having the thing to say on it as well.
He knows a lot about menopause. He spends a lot of time at the clinic. He's customer service.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. You've been doing this for a wee while. How many years have you been doing the clinic for now?
Yeah, it's coming up to about 4. I mean, when I started Meno Doctor, I was still working as a GP, and I was just doing 1 day a month through a gynae clinic locally, and it was just a Sunday. I was just doing a Sunday, and I thought, this is, nobody's going to book, nobody's going to turn up. And we had our sort of basic website up there that my clever husband did for me. And I remember the first booking I got, it was like, I was so excited. I was like, somebody's booked.
Yeah.
But somewhere in my gut, even though everyone thought I was mad, and I suppose I did as well, I just knew, I was like, no, I think women want something like this.
Yeah.
I think women want something like this, and I think they need something like this, and I think I could hopefully give this to them. And for me as well, as everyone knows, GPs get 15 minutes to solve some very complex problems, and you've just got people in and out. You see nearly 30 people a day, and your head spins. So I was like, I want more time. The women want more time, and so do I.
Yeah.
It just grew sort of reasonably slowly, but also probably quite quickly. And then over time, other doctors have come on board. So now I don't do general practice at all. I just do Meno Doctor, and we've got a physical clinic in Tauranga, where Bronx sometimes, comes to welcome the ladies. But mostly we see women online, it's virtual, heaps of virtual appointments. So we see women from all over the place in New Zealand. And we keep their GP involved. We always like to write to the GP unless the woman says, I'd rather you didn't.
Yeah.
And we respect that. But I feel like I'm helping GPs a bit as well, in terms of, being able to give women this information and this time that GPs sometimes can't, and to involve the GP, to write to them. And our letters usually try and put in a few bits of education for the GPs, hopefully without feeling like we're saying we know more than you.
Yeah.
Because it is hard for GPs to do all of this, and I think women's health doesn't fit well in general practice.
No, it doesn't. It's a bit more specialised.
I think we need women's health GPs, and we need menopause GPs, and and when a woman's going through this and she's waiting in the waiting room, there's people coughing everywhere, and she goes into this room and it feels rushed, and and you start to think as a woman, you're like, oh, there's people have got cancer, and here I am, in the doctor's room, and he looks all busy, and he's, so women can diminish their own symptoms, but then they can have them diminished by someone else as well, and it just feels really stressful to try and get into the meat of what's going on, because it is an emotional time for women as well. So the clinic gave me an opportunity to give women more time as well as myself, and we can really get into things, and women go out or leave the consult hopefully feeling better than when they started, with a plan of action, whatever that looks like. And that's what I wanted to offer, and it's happening, I think.
And I think also what we said earlier was that you would, after talking to you, I'm sure they can come away thinking, oh, actually, I'm not crazy, I'm not losing my mind, this is a normal part of my life and my journey, but there's better ways for me.
Yeah, because women are lonely. Women are often really lonely, even though we're all going through it, It's bizarre how lonely this universal event is, and how quiet and secretive it's been. So, there's an element of just talking itself is therapeutic, and having someone who really genuinely seems to care, and it's not just rushing you sort of through, or not quite understanding how hard it can be, and giving women some hope, that there's options, and you don't have to rush into any options. You can change your mind, you can do nothing, you can do everything. And ultimately, you can usually find something, some package or combination that is going to help every woman, but it's not going to be the same for every woman, and sometimes it takes longer to find for some women than others. But I think the talking is part of what helps, the being listened to, and getting a plan, because women do sometimes feel that they've read so much now, because once it was no information, and now we've probably tipped into too much information. And so now women have gone from being, I don't know anything about perimenopause, to, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. Where's the truth? Where's my truth? For that woman, because her version will be different to someone else's. So they like that time to go over everything and figure out what's her plan, a personalized plan of action. And as you say, to know it's normal, but that doesn't mean it's not hard.
Yes.
But it's also, for most women, temporary.
Yes.
As in, the symptoms do go away eventually on their own, except the vaginal and bladder ones. And I don't know if you want to talk about those bits, Chris.
I think it's important because it's what they go through. Right?
Pelvic floors are quite important. Weight training, that bit of women's bodies, all of that really does miss these hormones. And of all the hormones out there that we can give to women, probably the most important one is to give vaginal estrogen, which is something we don't give out enough to women. It's not HRT, it's not a systemic treatment, it just replaces estrogen there, and it can do wonders for bladders, pelvic floor muscles as well. But there's so many parts of our body and life that this phase can change, but there's something we can do about all of it.
So libido is probably another thing that we haven't discussed, but that can be affected quite a lot as well, right?
Massively. And a lot of women say it's almost quite sudden sometimes, it's kind of, which fits with what hormones can do. There's not many things in life that do things really quickly.
Yeah.
But sometimes hormones can do that. And women know this with our menstrual cycles, how we can love our husband one day, then hate his guts the next. We're just riding these powerful waves. And libido is another aspect of our life that menopause and perimenopause likes to stick its nose into. And libido is complicated. It's not just about hormones. For women, there's all kinds of other things that come into it. Life gets very unsexy generally for us, with kids and jobs and our changing body, and we're tired, we're sore, so there's all of that all matters, and it changes as we get older. But hormones are also playing a role in robbing us of that libido, that desire for sex. And even the experience of sex can be different. So we don't orgasm the same, we don't feel sensation the same. So there's lots of mean stuff that change, and then that's it can affect our relationships. And healthy lifestyle plays a role in libido. We know that the more you exercise, the better you sleep, the better you eat, cut out the alcohol, cut out the processed foods.
Yes.
That's all good for sex drive. But hormones can also be good for sex drive. And that's really where testosterone can shine.
Yeah.
That's one of the symptoms that we've shown it can really help with, although not for everybody.
So again, case by case on this stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? You kind of think, well, surely we just put the hormones in, does its thing. But no, we are more complicated than that. There's all kinds of things, in between in our body. It's a complex factory. And nature, she sometimes just won't let certain things happen for us. And there's a bit of acceptance that this phase brings us, where yes, we're not as young as we were. Life is going to be different. Doesn't have to be worse though, just different. And some of these symptoms don't go away as quickly as we'd like. But so there's an element of just kind of a bit of acceptance, but I wouldn't say too much acceptance.
You
don't need to just lie down and take all this crap. We can do something about it.
Absolutely. So what are some your most sort of common myths that you hear for menopause or premenopause, like people that think things but just simply not true at the moment?
Probably this, we can all get a bit too obsessed with periods and hot flushes as being the only things that mean anything, so and a lot of doctors, are like this, and I was like this. If I think to what my brain knew about menopause when I was first working as a GP, it was probably just, it's hot flushes and periods stop, and that was kind of it. And perimenopause, which was even less talked about or known about at med school, you probably still were in your head saying, that's when periods change. So everybody's looking at the womb to say something. So a lot of women are having symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, but they're not, if they're in perimenopause, they're not always having period changes. So it can be more subtle signs first, things like fatigue or joint pain or insomnia and sleep problems, and then anxiety, mood changes is another big one. And hot flushes and night sweats are the most famous symptoms of this life phase. But again, not every woman gets them. But there's a myth that, you've not got perimenopause unless you've got those. And the other myth is you can't take HRT unless you've got those. And that's in a lot of doctors' heads as well, because that is kind of what we're taught and what most of the guidelines say. They say HRT is to treat vasomotor symptoms. And vasomotor symptoms are what we call hot flushes and night sweats. So there's some, symptoms there's some myths around the symptoms you have to have. And then there's myths around when can you give a woman HRT and when could she not have it? The hot flushes are not a requirement. Some doctors as well are not that aware, and women as well, that you can take HRT in perimenopause. It's not just a post-menopause therapy. So they're probably some of the main ones that are still lingering out there.
Yeah. Okay. So, and when someone comes and sees you at your clinic or virtually online, and you deem that they're worthy or they're worthwhile prescribing HRT, how do you go about that? And then, like, I guess for me, what I'm trying to understand is you give them their first medication allowance. How do you then track and make sure this stuff is working and in the right way for this person? And like you say, when things change, what are we doing to sort of navigate that journey for them?
Yeah. It's wishy-washy, for want of a better word, right? And it's basically the woman herself. I say to women, you know, you can have these checklists of symptoms that you rate, and you say, well, am I sleeping better? Am I less anxious? You know, have I had less pain this week? A lot of these things are quite hard to measure, though. You know, but some women we sort of, you can almost fill a questionnaire in before you start it, and then one at 3 months later. For me, I often say to women, what we want to achieve with HRT is for you to feel like yourself again.
Yep.
Right. And women, and that, because often that's how they describe all the symptoms. I don't feel like myself anymore, you know, which is a very big kind of difficult thing to define or measure. So it's kind of like the woman's symptoms do the talking. And if you start HRT or anything else, whether that's herbal remedy or non-hormonal medication, you do have to wait usually as well, like with lifestyle as well, don't you? You know, it's not going to happen overnight. So you stick with something and wait. With HRT, my magic number is we've got to give it 6 weeks. So we give it 6 weeks before we decide, was this a good idea or not?
Yeah.
Did we get the dose right or not? Dosing wise with HRT, I tend to just start low, see how she feels, and increase if needed. But the way she's going to assess whether it's helpful is in how she feels generally. So you want that woman to come back, and whatever symptoms were bothering her the most to start with, because remember, everyone's kind of different. You want all of them, preferably, to have somewhat improved, if not completely improved. And for some women, even just a low dose, they've all improved enough for her to say, I think, you know, I'm feeling a lot better and doing everything else better. And the way you increase it is similar. You basically increase it and wait. And you can't take too many of these hormones, you know, and our body doesn't like it.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, estrogen. If a woman's suddenly gets given a really high dose of estrogen, you know, she's going to get breast pain, she's going to get pelvic, she might get a period, she might get headaches, palpitations. You know, weirdly, too much estrogen can feel similar to too little estrogen. Symptoms can be similar. So this is Goldilocks dose in the middle. But if you go slowly and gradually, you can normally find it. Some women need the estrogen or the progesterone given to her in different ways, different formats. With estrogen, we tend to avoid tablets, ideally, although sometimes we use them. But oral estrogen is what has a small clotting risk. Clots in the legs, lungs, the things you can sometimes get from the contraceptive pill.
Right.
But in HRT, we can put estrogen through a woman's skin instead. That's what patches are, and gels of estrogen do. So then we don't have any clotting risk that day. It's a safer way to give it. But some women can't absorb through their skin. So sometimes HRT doesn't work because the woman's just been wearing a sticker.
Yeah.
And the patch has been not getting through the barrier.
Okay.
Because skin is a barrier. It's doing its job. It's supposed to keep stuff out. So putting hormones through the skin is quite a challenge. And some women's bodies do it better than others. So sometimes with HRT, there's these little tweaks we need to make for the woman to get the effect. But the way we measure it is how she's feeling. Have those severe symptoms become more moderate or mild or gone? And there is an element of waiting, just like when you start an exercise regime. You're not going to see results straight away. And sometimes it can be even hard to measure that. You can weigh yourself, but that's not telling you what you're made of.
Yeah.
You know, and it's about how are your clothes looking, how do you look in the mirror, what's your shape like, but also how do you feel. So HRT, it's this broad sort of summary that the woman will come back to you and she'll tell her story about how it's going.
Okay, cool. And you do that, like, say, every sort of 6 weeks with initially at the start kind of thing?
Yeah, only at the start, really. So, and to be honest, women can wait 3 months before they necessarily need to have a review. Often I let women do a little increase themselves at 6 weeks if we've started low dose, and then have that proper review at 3 months.
Yeah.
And once a woman's got steady on it, women get very smart at judging things themselves, you know, and I mean, really, after that, we only need to really review it once a year.
Okay.
If things change, her symptoms come back, or she gets new things going on, or she suddenly gets bleeding when she hadn't had any bleeding before, you know, there are reasons to come and check in and tweak things. But a lot of women on HRT are kind of the experts, you know, themselves. They know what their body's telling them, whether it's right, whether it's not right. I think the important messages for women, certainly that message that you're not alone, you're not mad, you're not sick, and you're not without options. There's lots of them, and it doesn't have to involve a doctor at all if you don't want it to. But we are there as well. We should be there as part of the team if that's something you want. So that on that options table, women have lots, which means if menopause or perimenopause is really kicking your ass, you know, you don't necessarily have to just carry on yourself struggling through. There are things out there that can help.
And if someone wants to get in contact with you, how do they get in contact with you?
Easiest way is through the Meno Doctor website. So it's menodoctor.com.
Okay.
And then there's loads of info on there to have a read through. There's also a survey that I did a couple of years ago that's on there that you can download, that talks about the experience of over 4,000 women here in New Zealand with menopause. And you can book appointments with our clinic through them. We've got a team of doctors, and we've also got a nutritionist and a pelvic physio and a health coach as well. So the website's the place to go to have a look at what we offer.
Look, I really appreciate your time, and it's been fantastic talking to you. You've taught me some things as well, so I really appreciate that. It's always nice to learn a bit more about this kind of stuff.
I'm glad you're interested in it, because women do need help with the training side of things, you know. And I do think we can learn from men, you know. And I know you weren't allowed to say that, but like even like the protein shakes and men have been doing this for bloody years, and it's all really good for women too. You know, we need muscle and protein just as much as you guys, and we can do it together.
Yeah,
that's
a good thing to do it with your partner, your spouse, to have a healthy lifestyle together in the same journey, supporting each other. You're bringing yourselves closer together for good reasons as well. So I think it's really good together.
That's the other thing I love about lifestyle, you know, and weights, because it's, you know, it's man-friendly stuff too.
Yeah.
So it's relationship friendly.
Yeah, exactly. It's cool. And you can pull each other up, and one person doesn't want to do it one day. Like, come on, let's go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a good solution for so many reasons.
Yeah.
It really is. So
I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And
you're welcome.